Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm going to be showing you guys my hour by hour 2024 presidential election prediction between Vice President Kamala Harris, who will be facing off the former President Donald Trump, to see which swing states will be called in which hour. So to start off this video, 7 o'clock p.m. poll closings Eastern Time from the states highlighted in yellow, and 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific Time. So right off the bat, the solid states called for Donald Trump, no surprise, will be Indiana, Kentucky, and South Carolina, which would give him 28 electoral votes at 7 o'clock to Kamala Harris's 3 electoral votes from the state of Vermont. And then we have two competitive battleground states, Virginia and Georgia, are highlighted in yellow, in which they cannot be called because they are too early to call. And then we have our Georgia polling data, which shows on the 538 average, Donald Trump holds a 2.3% lead. He is favored in the state of Georgia at 49.1% to Vice President Kamala Harris's 46.8% in this state. And then we have our second batch of poll closings, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, from these three states, Ohio, West Virginia, and the battleground state of North Carolina. So at the 7:30 p.m. mark, Vice President Kamala Harris will be at 23 electoral votes, trailing Donald Trump at 50 electoral votes. At 7:30, Ohio will be projected for Donald Trump, and Illinois can be called for Kamala Harris. And then you have the districts in Maine. Trump will take Maine's 2nd congressional district. Meanwhile, Kamala wins Maine's 1st and at large as well. And then West Virginia would also be called for Donald Trump. And Virginia and Georgia will both remain too early to call. And then we have our 8 o'clock p.m. poll closings Eastern Time from a big batch of states highlighted in yellow. Florida will be projected for Donald Trump at around 8 to 8:30, with the state's 30 electoral votes for former President Donald Trump. I think at around the 8:30 mark, then Donald Trump will be projected to win the state of Florida by 8 percentage points, with 82% of the overall vote total estimated vote share. That is enough to project Donald Trump the winner of Florida at 54% to Kamala Harris's 46%. At this time, I think he'll win it by a likely margin. And then past 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, Trump will be put at 125 electoral votes to Vice President Kamala Harris's 77 electoral votes. And then Pennsylvania will be added to the too early to call state for the battleground. Same thing goes for New Hampshire. And then you have Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia remaining too early to call for those swing states. This is the map at around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then at about 8:30 p.m., or exactly 8:30, we will now see Arkansas polling close. And then another update on Virginia. I think this race will be extremely close at around 8:30, with 71% of the overall estimated vote is in. They cannot make a projection just yet. And then Georgia, an update on this state. I think at around 8:30 p.m., it will remain too early to call, with 46% of the vote share is in, and I won't be surprised if Kamala does hold a lead, obviously, because there's a lot of red counties that have not been called yet, therefore because it is too early to call, not even too close. And then we have our 9 o'clock p.m. poll closings Eastern Time from the states highlighted in yellow, including Arizona, Texas, very important border states that are very swing as well. I think at this time, at around 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern, we can now call New York with its 28 electoral votes for Vice President Kamala Harris. But I think it's going to be closer this time around than in any other presidential election. I think the margin for Harris is only 10 points in the state of New York, and it will be called for by around 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. With 53% of the estimated voters in, it will be enough to call New York for Kamala, but only by a margin of 10 percentage points, which will no longer be safe Democrat. It is now likely for Kamala Harris. And then I think at around 9:30 Eastern Time, North Carolina will be projected for Donald Trump with its 16 electoral votes. Yet again, at around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, I think we can now call North Carolina for Donald Trump. He'd win the state by a third time in a row, 3 straight elections, 2016, 2020, and again in 2024, with 85% of the estimated vote is in by a margin of 2.8%. At 9:30 p.m., Donald Trump will win North Carolina. These are the margins. And then I also think Colorado would be projected for Kamala Harris with its 10 electoral votes. I think she wins the state by close to 10 percentage points. I won't be surprised if she does manage to get double digits, as Biden once did in the 2020 election. This state overall is shifting towards the left. So around a little past 9:40 p.m., I think Colorado would be projected for Kamala Harris. And then New Hampshire with its 4 electoral votes, another a very important battleground state, but it's still not going to really do anything to get either candidate past 270 electoral votes. At around 9:50 p.m. Eastern Time, I can expect New Hampshire to be called for Kamala Harris by a margin of 5 percentage points. And then Texas could be called for Donald Trump in the around close to 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I would say in the late 9 o'clock, so around 9:55, 40 electoral votes for Donald Trump. So I expect Texas would be called for Trump at around 9:50 p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day, Tuesday, by around 9 percentage points, a likely margin. And then New Mexico would be called with its 5 electoral votes by around 9:45 p.m. for Kamala Harris. This is a border state, so things can get interesting. Maybe it would be close for Donald Trump, but still, Albuquerque is a Democratic stronghold county. It's hard for Trump to overcome the votes. And then you have Arizona. By around 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think it's going to be too early to call with 51% of the vote in. Kamala would take the lead because of the early vote, but still, it's too early to call at 10 o'clock p.m. We cannot project Arizona with its 11 electoral votes for any candidate. And then Wisconsin. At around 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think it would be too close to call with 70% of the overall vote shares in, and they have Donald Trump holding a slight lead by a couple percentage points. So around 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think Wisconsin would be too close to call with around roughly 70% in, and I expect Trump to be leading at this very moment because of a lot of those red counties that would be called first before the blue counties, which would favor Kamala later on in this state. And as for Michigan, I think it would be too early to call with around 60% of the overall vote at around 10 p.m. Eastern Time with its 15 electoral votes. I think it would be too early, and Donald Trump would hold a lead of almost 9 percentage points at around 10 o'clock on Election Day. So on Tuesday, at about past 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think Trump at that moment would get 212 electoral votes to the Vice President Kamala Harris's 138 electoral votes. And the states highlighted in yellow are yet to be called for either candidate, and they are all battleground and swing states, very competitive, important races. But at the time it's past 10 p.m., I can expect North Carolina and Texas would already be projected for Donald Trump, and Virginia and New Hampshire by around 10 p.m. would already be called for Kamala Harris. And as for the 10 o'clock p.m. poll closings Eastern Time from these 4 states, Montana, Utah, the battleground state of Nevada, and Iowa, I do think right before we get to that, we can project that Kamala Harris will win Minnesota with its 10 electoral votes at around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day. That is my guess. That is my prediction. At around 10:30 Eastern Time on Tuesday, we can call Minnesota for Kamala Harris by a margin of 5 percentage points, similar to New Hampshire. And I think that is very accurate because in 2020, both of these states went to Joe Biden by around the same margins of just 0.3%. And they vote in unison. Same thing goes for in 2016. Both of these states went to Hillary Clinton by just about 1 percentage point. So Minnesota and New Hampshire are very comparable and similar states. They vote by practically around the same margins. So I think 5 points for Harris in both Minnesota and New Hampshire would be accurate. That's my prediction. And then you have Georgia. I think at around almost 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I expect Georgia to be called for Donald Trump with its 16 electoral votes, the first flip for him of the night on Tuesday by around 3 percentage points. Yet again, at around almost 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think Georgia would be called for Donald Trump at around that specific time. And then you have the state of Virginia with its 13 electoral votes. Yet again, I expect Virginia to be called for Kamala Harris by a little past 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, like I mentioned earlier. And I expect her to win the state by about 4 percentage points. And then you have the state of Arizona. By about 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think it would be too close to call with 75% in, but I won't be shocked if Donald Trump were to hold a very lead. So at around 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day, I expect Arizona to be too close to call. They can't project it, but Donald Trump would barely be in the lead with its 11 electoral votes. So about 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day, Donald Trump would already be at 244 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 148. And then when she gets California's 55 electoral votes, it should get her obviously past 203 electoral votes. So we now have 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Times from the West Coast, including the state of Hawaii. But I do think at around 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, with the 11 o'clock p.m. poll closings, I think at that time, the Senate majority will be called for the Republicans. They will flip and take back control of the U.S. Senate at around 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and obviously 8 o'clock Pacific Time zone. That's my prediction. At around 11 p.m., the Senate majority will be called for the Republicans, taking 52 seats to the Democrats' 48 seats. This is my Senate map prediction at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day. And then I also think this will be the governor's map. North Carolina, obviously, I have Josh Stein defeating, Mark Robinson by about 8 percentage points. So the GOP would win 8 governor races to the Democrats' 3 governor races. And then you have Pennsylvania. At past 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I think this state would be too close to call, with 83% in, and Donald Trump would be narrowly up in this state with its 19 electoral votes. So past 11 o'clock p.m., Pennsylvania would be too close to call. We cannot project it for either candidate. And then in Nevada at 11 p.m., I also think it would be too close to call. At 87% of the estimated vote share is in, and I expect Trump to hold a very, very, very slight lead in this state at 11 p.m. And then I think at 11:45 p.m., that is my prediction, that Arizona, with its 11 electoral votes, will be called for Donald Trump. There will be the second flip for him tonight with Georgia. So at 11:45 p.m., I think that's when Arizona would be called by about 3 percentage points for the former president. So at about 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time, 262 electoral votes for Donald Trump to Kamala Harris's 226. He is getting very close to winning the election at around 12 a.m. Eastern Time, but they just can't call it just yet. This is how I think the electoral map would look like past 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Election Day. 4 states have not been called at 11:30. Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania are all outstanding states. So past 11:30, I think those 4 states will not be called past 11:30 o'clock. And then I think the House of Representatives will be called at around exactly 12 a.m. Eastern Time for the GOP. I think it's very close. I won't be shocked if the Democrats win the House with 99% of the estimated voters in. I think the House of Representatives race will be called at 12 a.m. Eastern Time. So it will be called around midnight. That's my guess. It's going to be an extremely tight race. And then at around 1 a.m. poll closings Eastern Time, the last poll closings of the night, Alaska, just one state. Obviously, Donald Trump is going to win that state pretty comfortably. No surprise there. And then I think at around 1 a.m., Pennsylvania will remain too close to call, with around 94% of the overall estimated vote is in, with its 19 electoral votes. Yet again, at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, I think Pennsylvania will not be called for any candidate. At 1 a.m., it should be too close to call. And then you have the state of Michigan. I also think at around 1 a.m. Eastern Time, with 75% in, it will remain too close to call, with Donald Trump narrowly in the lead with the state's 15 electoral votes. And then you have the state of Wisconsin, 90% in, too close to call. At 1 a.m., I expect this state to not be called for any candidate. It's going to be extremely close with its 10 electoral votes. So at this point in time, we're past 1 o'clock in the morning. With 268 electoral votes for Donald Trump, I think Nevada will be called for Donald Trump at around 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time, giving him 268 electoral votes, and Kamala Harris is stuck at trailing 226 electoral votes. And then Pennsylvania, with its 19 electoral votes, I expect this state to be called for Donald Trump at around 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Let me repeat myself. At 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Election Day, I think Pennsylvania would be called for Donald Trump. by about 1 percentage point, a tilt narrow victory, extremely close. And then you have the state of Wisconsin at around 1:45 p.m. a.m. Eastern Time, 10 electoral votes. I think Trump would be called the winner in the state of Wisconsin at around 1:45 a.m. Eastern Time by about 1 to 2 percentage points, a lean margin with 98% of the vote share in. So at 1:45 a.m., Wisconsin would be called for Donald Trump. So at about 2 a.m. Eastern Time, all states have been called except Michigan. Donald Trump would already be declared the next president, the 47th, to his second non-consecutive final term, had 297 electoral votes, and Kamala Harris at 226. So at 2 a.m. Eastern Time, my prediction is that by 2 a.m., every state will be called except for Michigan. I think Michigan would be the last state to be called in this election. That is my take. So I think Kamala Harris will be declared the winner in Michigan with its 15 electoral votes. I truly think it's a toss-up. If you guys don't know, in my 2024 final official prediction, I actually had Michigan going to Donald Trump. But that's just for the sake of the 3 Rust Belt states obviously voting in unison as they typically always usually do. But if they do split apart, I think Michigan would be going to Kamala Harris's column. So at about 2:15 a.m. Eastern Time on election night, Kamala Harris will be declared the winner in Michigan at around 2:15 a.m. by a margin of just 0.2%, under percentage point, an extremely tight race. I do think that Michigan will be the closest state out of all of them in this election. That is my hot take. And in 2020, the closest was Georgia. And in this election, I think it's going to be Michigan this time around for the closest state. So now we're past 2 a.m. Eastern Time, and Kamala Harris at 241 electoral votes. Donald Trump has already declared the winner at this time, at midnight, at 297 electoral votes. This is the map, the official map at 2 a.m. That is my prediction. So the winner of the popular vote will be extremely close. I honestly won't be shocked if Kamala Harris wins it. The same thing goes for Donald Trump. I think it'll practically be a tie. I think as of right now, both candidates get around 71 million votes. I think it's so close to the point where I just can't declare a winner. So there you guys go. This was my official hour-by-hour 2024 presidential election prediction. One last fine reminder is to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss all my content, press the like button, share this video. Don't forget we have memberships. If you're interested, you can find a link to that in the description section. That's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching.